Today we're going to learn the passive voice. The passive voice is formed with the verb to be in the appropriate tense and the past participle of the main verb. It's very important to note that only transitive verbs can be used in the passive. A transitive verb requires an object in the form of a noun or pronoun to complete its meaning, like the verbs bring, buy, read, pass, make, and so many other verbs are transitive verbs. He bought a new coat. In this sentence, we have the verb bought that is a transitive verb and it requires an object that we have here, a new coat. The usage. We use the passive when the person or people who do the action are not known, not important, or obvious from the context. For example, a rare review was written for our restaurant. In this case, it's not important who said this, but it's important that a rare review was written. Or the second example, instructions will be given to you. Not important to know who will give the instructions, but it's important to know that the instructions will be given to you. We also use the passive when the action itself is more important than the person or than the people who do it, as in newspaper headlines and newspaper articles and advertisements, instructions, etc. We have an example here. The agreement is being signed. Here it's important to note that the agreement is being signed and not who signed the agreement. Then we use the passive when we want to avoid taking responsibility for an action or when we refer to an unpleasant event and we do not want to say who or what is to blame. Like, she was misinformed about the meeting. She was misinformed about the meeting. Changing from active into passive. Only transitive verbs can be changed into the passive voice, but there are some transitive verbs that cannot be changed into the passive, like the verbs have, fit, suit, and some others. Because if we have an example like, I have a terrible headache, this is not possible to be changed into the passive voice because it doesn't make sense if we say a terrible headache is had by me. It is very important to be careful with the meaning. Changing a sentence from active to passive, you mustn't change the meaning of the statement. You have just switched the emphasis from the subject to the direct object. Like, someone ate the last cookie is the sentence in active. The last cookie was eaten. Now we have changed the emphasis from the subject, someone, to the object that the last cookie was eaten. First, identify the tense that the sentence is written in. It's important to keep the correct tense when changing from active to passive voice. Second, identify the sentence's subject, verb, and direct object. Finally, change the format so that the sentence begins with the direct object and ends with the subject. So the object becomes the subject in the passive sentence. We have an example here. This is a sentence in active and the other one, the sentence that is turned into passive voice. The shop assistant called the police. The shop assistant is the subject, called is the verb, and the police is the object. Now, the object becomes the subject of the passive voice. the police, because the verb here is in past simple, called, and we need the verb to be. That should be in the appropriate tense. In this case is past simple, and we use were. We match with the subject. The police were called by the shop assistant. The subject of the active sentence becomes the agent, and it is introduced with the preposition by. We use by plus agent to say who or what carries out an action. For example, Sam made breakfast. Breakfast was made by Sam. So, this is how we introduce the agent. The agent can be omitted when the subject is they, he, someone, somebody, people, one, and so on. They have eaten all the food. All the food has been eaten. In this case, we don't need to include the agent. But the agent is not omitted when the subject is a specific or important person, or when it is essential to the meaning of the sentence. Like, the restaurant was opened by Jamie Oliver. In this case, we can't leave the agent out. Here you have sentences that are changed from active into passive according to the tense they belong. For example, in present simple we have the professor teaches the students. The students are taught by the professor. Here we have the verb teaches that is in present simple, and according to the rule it has to be in past participle in order to form the passive voice, but we also need to use the verb to be in the appropriate tense, that is present simple. The students are taught by the professor. This is the same with other tenses as well. You just have to pay attention. What tense is it? Present continuous in this case. The professor is teaching the students. The students, we keep the same tense, are being taught. The main verb teach is used in past participle taught. The students are being taught by the professor. Let me mention the models in this case. The professor can teach the students. The students can be taught by the professor. You can pause the video and look at the tenses closer if you want, if you need. Let's move on with the next slide. The present perfect continuous and the past perfect continuous are not normally used in the passive. This is very important to know. Also, we can use the verb to get instead of the verb to be in everyday speech when we talk about things that happen by accident or unexpectedly. Example, his car got damaged in the accident. While with verbs, we take two objects such as bring, tell, offer, pay, send, promise, buy, lend, write, give. We can make two different passive sentences. Here you have the examples. He gave her a cookery book. She was given a cookery book. One sentence, and the second one, a cookery book was given to her. For further explanations, you can study the grammar reference bank that is at the end of your books, students' books, on screen C1. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, please let me know.